What film has impacted you the most and why? I mean, to the point of where like you're still obsessing over the film years later.
Oh man. Well, it always changes. I think different moods. I think you and I talked about this before. One of my favorite films, as an example, is You, Me, Everyone We Know. Right? We talked about this with Miranda July. Right? That film was really good. I mean, I think if I were to list top films, oh man, it's hard because I don't want to be tied down to any sort of like choice. American Beauty is one of my
Yeah.
favorite films.
Why? What was it about that film that just got you?
Well, I think bringing back. I think what I love about that film, obviously, is the masterful kind of storytelling. It's very. I don't want to use the word polished because I think sometimes polished has a bad connotation, but I think it's got a really clear vision, and I think it's great. But also, for me, it's got this kind of like inner life of the character. That was really interesting for me. You clearly see not just Kevin Spacey's character, but everybody's got some sort of inner life, and I think that's really kind of interesting. Godfather, Part Two is great, because it's very epic, and I also like directors who kind of like have a wide frame and let actors kind of play. I think that's really exciting, and I think that happened a lot with that film. I mean, obviously there are really incredible like close-ups and shots, but you know, Francis Ford Coppola was really good with framing his shots in a kind of like a photographic way that lets the audience decide what is interesting. And I saw that film in a really, really kind of a young age, so that was very impactful. I could go on and on. Stand By Me is really great. I love that film because of how it talks about innocence and the loss of innocence. And I think that I saw that movie as a kid, and I think that was a parallel in my life in some ways. Gosh.
So going back to inner life, what is that? That's if we want to use American Beauty as a case study, what is that inner life that the writer is showing the viewer?
I don't know. I don't know exactly in terms of what their intentions were. Sam Mendes. But talking about what we said earlier in a previous question about why do we tell stories, and it's so that we don't feel so alone per se, right? And I think that movie in some ways delivers this idea that there is this outside shell of a life that we call life. You've got the lawn, you've got the white fence, you've got the neighbors, and you've got the car, and you've got the 9-to-5 job per se, right? And then there's this inner life that we don't usually share with people, or there's this inner conflict about where we think we are in our lives, and then the movie is essentially about all those kind of private, lives that we have that we would not have access to outside in the streets, right? You can't walk around and see people's inner life, you just sort of see what is. And I think that movie does what theater cannot do, I think, in some ways, right? And I think it does what maybe even a lot of different mediums of art can't do. I think film allows you to bring the audience in a very kind of explicit way into the private lives of people. And I think it's possibly through that kind of examination that the audience gets to see, oh, well, I've thought that same thing, or I've said that same thing before, or I've felt that way before. And I think there's something about that connects people, to it. I mean, when I go watch movies by myself, and when I go watch movies with a friend or friends, I think it's a different experience. You know, I think when I go watch movies by myself, it's a more intimate, personal kind of connection. And I like to go watch movies by myself because I like to have that kind of connection with the story, you know. So
Yeah, it is a different, because I think too with the friend, you're making sure the friend is laughing at the same part. Yeah,
Right.
oh, isn't that funny? Okay, yeah, great. Okay, good. We both agree that's
Right.
fine. But when you're by yourself, you don't need to. You're not pleasing anyone.
I think when you go with friends, you know, the entertainment value of a movie is higher on the list, right? Because you get a popcorn, and you go out there and you're on a date, or you're out there with celebrating something with friends. When you're going out there by yourself, like you said, you're choosing that movie based on no one else's decision but yours, right? And you're like, I want to watch that actor, or I want to watch that scene, or blah 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 blah. And it's really, I mean, I guess for that person, I'm sure that person wants to be entertained, but there's probably a real good chance that that person wants to feel less alone in some ways, you know, possibly. So I don't know, maybe.
But then I think there's some movies that they're really best that you see alone,
Yeah.
because you don't get the same. It's not the same impact.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw, I mean, just as a random example, because we're talking about, I saw Lion by myself.
Oh wow.
And I was just bawling, you know. But I've seen a lot of movies by myself, and I think it's enjoyable.
How was that to just, sorry if I'm going too far with this, but to one after it because I remember the film too, and it was incredibly emotional when lights came up and you got that awkward, like going into the elevator or wherever you're going to get your car.
You know, it's interesting you said that. It's interesting that you like the movie so much, because
Absolutely.
I have heard, and I don't know if this is not scientific at all, but a lot of my male friends have really enjoyed the movie. And at the same time, I've also heard some female friends who have not been as, you know, big fans of the movie. And I don't, you know, I mean, I think the movie is obviously got nominated. It's a good movie. Technically, it's a good movie. But I also think the movie, for me, I don't know for you, but for me, it reminded me of my mother. You know, it's such a mother-son relationship, you know, and obviously it's right there in the script. But did you feel that? I mean, what did you think? Did you think about how did you walk away from the movie?
For me, it was about someone trying to figure out where they came from and essentially figure out who they were based on that.
Yeah.
And there were so many unanswered questions. And so if you've ever had a parent that wasn't around or some missing component like that, for me, I tapped into that because he became so obsessed, and that's all he could think about, and looking at this map and trying to have these memories and really essentially try to figure out who he was.
Right.
If he could just get back there or make sense of these things.
Right.
So that's where it resonated for me.
That's interesting.
So I don't know if it was really more of a male-female thing in my sense. I think it was just anybody who has unanswered questions, if they're adopted, or if they have unanswered questions about, you know, where they came from or what happened in their early life. So to me, that's why it got to me. And it was one of those movies where you can't be just like, you know, oh yeah, hey, how's it going, to the person next to you afterwards. You needed a good 5-10 minutes to like.
Yeah.
You know.
No, you have to kind of like
yourself.
focus on the movie because it deserves that attention for sure.
Yeah, and then you add the music.
Yeah,
I mean, it was everything.
Everything across the board.
Right. And there's not a lot of movies that do that. I mean, there's movies that are good, and then there's movies that you don't forget. And I think that's one of those movies that, for certain people, you just don't forget that.
Amazing experience, for sure. Yeah.
So do you remembered kind of coming out of the theater and did you?
You know, I mean, I definitely felt a lot of the same things that you felt, but in a more kind of a primal way. I felt the connection to my own mother. You know, my mother, you know, kind of sacrificed a lot, and I always feel like I don't thank her enough. I always feel like I don't show her enough kind of gratitude, and then it made me think about being lost and disconnected with her in a very kind of metaphorical way, even though, she's 6-7 hours away and I can call her anytime, I want to. But I still felt like I was that character in some ways, that who somehow got lost and forgot about, where he came from, and forgot about, the parents' sacrifice. So for me, it resonated with me in that way, as well. So